So as you can tell, Pastor Ben isn't here. Just a little hiccups here and there, but we're going to get it done anyway. And he's out on vacation this week for the next 2 weeks with his lovely wife, Connie. And I think this is an anniversary trip for them, 10th anniversary. She's put up with that rascal for 10 years. But he'll be back next week, and I'm confident of that because I think after 2 weeks in the car with him, she's going to drop him off at the doorstep here and make sure that he's with us next week. And so I know we're looking forward to that, and maybe we won't have so many mistakes next week. But it's good to see everyone here. Well, this morning, speaking of rascals, we're going to continue our study of Jacob, one of the founders of our faith. And we see that he's got another little bit of a spot he's in this week, too. Seems like Jacob's always in something, isn't he? But as we can continue to look at Jacob, I think we also got to keep in mind the final story, the ending of all of this. And we read that in Revelations, don't we? We know that everything's going to work out eventually, but if we don't keep that in mind, we might ask, why in the world would God pick somebody like Jacob as one of his chosen saints? But you know, God has promised some great blessings to Jacob, actually through his mother Rebekah, and we know that God is always good to his word. Eventually it's going to come true. But he's got a lot of work to do with Jacob, and we're going to see more of that next week even. And Ben gets back and we'll continue even to talk about Jacob and his continuing march to his promise from God. That is, if Connie don't kill him before then, but we hope that don't happen. But if you remember Jacob, and by the way, if you'll recall also, Jacob in Hebrew is actually translated to mean the supplanter or deceitful. So he was designated while he was still in Rebekah's womb to be the chosen one, above his brother Esau, even though his brother Esau was older. Now that's always mystified me a little bit. We've got twin grandkids, and somehow once in a while they'll put us in place and let us know which one is the oldest. It seemed like a few minutes makes a lot of difference. But that was the tradition and culture of that time, is that the oldest was the one who would get the blessing and the inheritance. But that wasn't to be so here because God chose Jacob, even though he was the younger one. And we see throughout the study of God's word that very often God's will trump local traditions and culture. That's just the way it is. And he also will often work his will in this world through people that we wouldn't think to choose. That he will put them in the right place at the right time. Well, Jacob certainly lived up to his name. Here a couple of weeks ago, we heard when he deceived his father Isaac and got Esau's blessing and inheritance. Now, we don't feel too sorry for Esau, because Esau, if you recall also, kind of gave up his inheritance for a bowl of stew, but it still was a deceitful way. You know, I always thought, what if Rebekah had just shared with Isaac what God had told her, the vision she had had from God, that Jacob was to be the chosen one? Then they could have worked together to make all this happen. We wouldn't have had to have all this deceit and all these lies. But she had to do it her way. And that's not unusual because Jacob's grandmother and grandfather did the same thing, didn't they? Abraham and Sarah. Remember, God told them that they were going to have many, many descendants, and they didn't want to wait on that. So Sarah devised a plan, and off they went, and we're paying for that today as we see the conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis. And as we continue to cover this series on the foundations of our faith and some of those founding fathers, we're going to see that they're not perfect. All through it, there's things to be worked on, and they fall short. But now Jacob, we find him as we join him today, he's on the run. He's got to get out of town because his brother Esau, well, he's just a little bit angry. He's mad at Jacob, and as a matter of fact, Rebekah had heard that Esau was out to kill Jacob. I mean, it's going to be another Cain and Abel situation here if Jacob don't get out of town. So she goes to Jacob and says, hey, it's best you run off to my brother Laban's place and sit there for a while until Esau cools down, so to speak. So off he goes. But then she's got to devise another deceitful lie. So she goes to Isaac and tells him, look, I don't want Jacob marrying any of these local girls. She don't like these local girls. So I want him to go off to my brother Laban's place and find him a wife. Now Isaac bought that, and he would, because you'll read in the scripture that earlier on he and Rebekah discussed. They didn't like the two wives that Esau had. He had picked local girls, and they didn't like their daughters-in-laws. So he bought it. He gave the blessing. Off goes Jacob. And we just heard how Jacob ends up not with one wife, but two. You know, I think God often has a sense of humor about us and how we work things. But you'll also remember a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Ben told us about the story of how Isaac got his wife, Rebekah. Remember? Abraham sent off one of the servants, said, go find Isaac a wife. And we didn't particularly care for that because that's not the way we do it in our culture. We think that finding a life's partner is so important that we ought to really work on that and go out and do it ourselves. So we go out and seek our partner. You know, we want to make sure that we like them, that we're compatible with them. And it doesn't hurt if we're attracted to them. Well, I'm going to ask you, how's that process work for us? If you look at the numbers and the number of marriages that end in divorce, maybe not all that well. So I'm not sure that I have the answers to all this. Sheila and I have a couple of friends, they're from another country, but they are from a arranged marriage. They've been married longer than we have. Very happy couple, great family, good kids, and very successful. So I don't have the answers to it. I don't think any of us do. When we go trying to figure out God, you know, we get in trouble. But I would say this, if we know God's will, it certainly would behoove us to go after his will and do it his way if we just know that. It'd be a much better path for us. But we find this morning that things are going pretty well for Jacob. He is on the run, but he's arrived in his uncle Laban's place, and he's there at the well, and there he spots Rachel, and he's smitten, so to speak. This is the girl for him. This is the one he wants. But then he has this discussion with his uncle Laban. His uncle Laban says, hey, you need to start earning your keep here, you know. So, but only thing I got for you probably is being a shepherd, so that's a lot of hard work. What do you think would be just compensation for that? And of course he says, well, I want your daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. So they make a little deal there. 7 years he's going to have to work if he wants Rachel for his wife. You ever hear that phrase, nothing's free? Well, Jacob's going to learn that the hard way. 7 years is a long time, but let's stop the presses. Something goes wrong, doesn't it? As always, in the day-to-day workings of the world, something goes wrong. So after these 7 years of labor are up, the wedding takes place, and they have all the festivities, probably a little bit too much wine, you know, the day of the festivity. And Jacob woke up the next morning. He ain't with Rachel. He's with Leah, the older sister. Jacob ain't happy because Jacob has already made the comment that he knows he's seen Leah. Matter of fact, he makes the description in Scripture. He says, Leah, whose eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. So that wasn't quite what he was looking to wake up with that morning. Well, he's mad. He's mad, and he confronts his uncle Laban. But Laban immediately puts him in his place. He says, look, what you ask is not possible. In our culture, the oldest daughter has to be married first. So if you want Rachel, you're going to have to first accept Leah. And then you're going to have to work another 7 years to get Rachel. No, he ain't happy. Certainly isn't happy. But he doesn't argue. He goes ahead and works the additional 7 years. And even going forward, as you read in the story of Jacob, you'll find that it ain't over yet. It continues to be a story that's worked out. You know, I don't want to make light of culture. Sheila and I have lived in a lot of different cultures. Matter of fact, wherever we've lived, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Colorado, Italy, Korea, Hawaii even. All of those places had different cultures and traditions, and we had to learn those. We had to live within them. It was either learn them or not be very productive, and we had to go along with them. Each time we would dig into those cultures and try to find out what we liked and what we didn't. Now, we could have been like some of the folks. There are some folks who, particularly overseas, they will not get out and venture. They'll go from the home to the base, home to the base, home to the base. Kind of like somewhere else we know. People go from home to work, and home to work, and home, to church, and then back home to work. Does this sound familiar? Sometimes we like to stay with what's familiar. Nothing wrong with that. We learn those cultures, we experience them, but then where do we end up? Back home. There's also another good old saying, there's no place like home. Not saying that you have to adopt cultures, but it certainly is good to learn them, to know where other people are coming with. You have to learn them, but then you got to move on and create your own life. Seek what your life should be in God's will. But we're in their culture, and we respected that. And so it was with Jacob. You notice he didn't argue with Laban. He got on with it. He moved on. He served his additional time, and he got his promises from God. And eventually he will fulfill God's purpose in his life. And that's a long way off if you'll remember all the scripture. Now, make no mistake, I have no sympathy for Jacob, none whatsoever. You know, that another saying, what goes around comes around. The deceiver has been deceived, and he has nothing to say about it, and I think that could be a part of it too. He knows it. He's learned a hard lesson there. You know, he took an entire inheritance from his brother off of deceit. And he has yet to show any remorse for it. Oh, he showed some fear for it. He's on the road because he's afraid Esau is going to kill him. But no remorse, no mention that I shouldn't have done that. He's learned a valuable lesson, and I think so do we. But God's not through with him yet, and he's not through with us yet either. You know, we love to complain about our lot in life. We do. Almost every day, at least I do. I'm out working the chickens, and I'm arguing with God about what's going on. It's a constant thing. We love to complain about our lot in life. And I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard the phrase, it ain't fair. You know, I once heard that in what we call an office hours session. I turned to my chief and I said, could somebody give me a definition of fair? Because I tell you, you hear millions of definitions about that. It's different to everybody. It kind of reminds me of this judge back in the 70s. He was hearing a case on the topic of pornography in a local community, and he says, well, I'm not sure I can define it, but I know it when I see it. And we're still dealing with that today. Still, to some, a picture may be art. To some others, that may be pornography. Same thing it is with culture. To some, that's the way to go. To others, it can be downright disgusting. You know, no matter how many times I tried fermented fish, I never developed a taste for it. You know, it's kind of like old President H.W. Bush once said about broccoli, I just don't like it. It's that simple. You know, I was going to a liaison affair one time with Mr. Yee, and we were in the car going, and I says, man, I don't look forward to eating that fermented fish again. And he says, well, just going to have to bear with it. And I said, yeah, but I just don't like it. I said, if you like it, you eat it. He says, well, what makes you think I like it? And I said, well, you're always eating it. He says, so are you. He said, and when you're back home, said, you go to somebody's house and they offer you something to eat, do you turn your nose up, say, I ain't eating it, I don't like it? Probably not. You go ahead and eat it, right? I go, yeah, got a good point, but I still don't like it. The foundations of faith, the legacies of our faith. That's the topic of our sermon series. And I think Jacob today in this story, in this scripture, shown us a little bit about faith. I think the first thing he would tell us is that faith is active. You know, in the Hebrew language, the word that stands for faith is not a noun, it's an active verb. It's active. Faith is something that is active. It's not just sitting around waiting for something to happen. If we want to realize the promises of God, we got to get at it. We got to go and work at it. As Miss Faith likes to hear me say, we need to get off our keisters and get to moving. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Paul, name all of them. All of them. All the founders of our faith. They had to take a lot of risks to realize the promises of God. They didn't just sit still, and so must we. Look, I'm not suggesting you got to pack up all your goods and head somewhere and move to a foreign land as missionaries do. We're not all cut out for that. But I don't think sitting around the house doing nothing is going to get it either. I think there's a balance in there somewhere. Even if you're disabled, there's still things you can do for God's kingdom. You can pray. You can study God's word. You can be a testimony to others and show them that even in the worst of times, you can still serve God and be an example for others. So it's active. I think he's also showing us today that it's not easy. Faith is not easy. It's hard work. And it is more than just believing. And I tell you, in the history of our church, many people have died because of their faith. They've suffered and died. Look at the disciples even. Most of them didn't have a very pleasant death. Only one of them died a natural death. That was John. And he did a lot of suffering along the way. Wasn't easy for him. But sometimes it just seems like it's too much, don't it? You know, a recent spike in my health and blood pressure led me to have to do a blood pressure test. And at the end of it, it's a long story, but at the end of it, I was advised that one of the things I need to do is back off on some of my church activities. And I was incredulous. I almost got indignant with the doctor and said, "You got to be kidding me. You're crazy as a Looney Tune." He says, "Look, it's your comments. Read your comments of what you were doing when you had the spikes." And so I went and then contacted one of my longtime trusted advisors, good old Dr. Slickner, and I talked to her for probably about 2 hours. And she says, "John, look, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It ain't going to work without a lot of pressure." And she says, "So why don't you just listen," which you're not good at doing, back off, take it easy for a while, and figure out how to work this thing out. See how you can contribute without having to be in leadership positions. This civilian world, she's talked to me before, it ain't fitting too well. And it says, quit trying to put the square peg in the round hole. Get out of your comfort zone. Start doing what you need to do in the way that you need to do it. Then if you don't think that works, then go back to it, and Sheila will get the insurance quicker rather than later. But so faith is active. It's hard. It isn't easy. But also, finally, we find out that faith is not instant. The results of our faith is not instant gratification. We don't get an immediate result most of the time. And that's not good for somebody like me. I mean, if you know me at all, you know patience is not one of my attributes. I just don't work at it too good. Somebody just amen that, I think. Yeah. Look, it took Jacob 14 years to get what he wanted. That's a long time in our culture, 14 years is a long time. But think about Moses. It took him 40 years to get the Israelites from Egypt out of bondage over to the promised land. And guess what? He didn't even get to go in. 40 years. If you were to start that walk today, it wouldn't take you a year. It took him 40 years. That's a lot of effort. That's a lot of faith. But go back further than that. This story of Jacob is going to end up in Egypt to start over 400 years of bondage before they even get to go on that 40-year trip to the promised land. It took a lot of time, a lot of that patience. Ooh, that word. But it didn't stop there either. You know, I'm doing a lot of reading during this COVID time. I've been doing a lot of reading the Old Testament, and you'll find, particularly in the book of Jeremiah and the book of Ezekiel and Lamentations, a lot about the bondage of the Israeli people under King Nebuchadnezzar for about a generation. You ask why? Well, if you read it, there's a couple of words you'll see throughout all three of those. Therefore and because. God tells us why. We don't listen to that. We don't learn those lessons. We got to redo it. We do it over and over and over again. And it's mainly because they didn't keep their faith active. They didn't keep the faith. But in every case, just when they thought everything was lost, there was no hope, God redeems them. And so it is with us. You know, I know at times it seems like the world is caving in around us. We don't hear anything but negativity. Everything's going wrong. But we got to keep in mind that God is still here. He's in the midst of all of it. And if we're going to realize our promise, the promise that he made to us, that promise of eternal life with him, then we got to keep at it. We got to keep the faith, and we got to press on. You know, one of my favorite songs is a song by George Strait. It's titled Here for a Good Time. You know, in the song, the words go, he says, I'm not going to lay around and whine and moan because somebody's done me wrong. And don't think I'm just going to sit around and sing some old sad song. He says, I believe it's half full, not a half empty glass. And every day I wake up knowing this could be my last. I ain't here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. Folks, we're not here for a long time, believe it or not. Miss Lynn just made a comment of how fast things are moving. They're moving fast, and we got to realize our promises and exercise our faith while we're here to be able to do it. We got to move on, and we got to work hard at the promises that God has made to us and the promises we've made to God. We got to deliver on those. Times are hard. Times are hard now, folks. I know it. But let's not just lay around and whine and moan about it. Let's get up. Let's get to moving. Figure out how we can serve and how we can worship God, even in these difficult times. You know, one thing I learned today, it's not a bad idea to volunteer to do the sermon or to sing a solo. You can take your mask off, see? There's ways to work around all this stuff, right? Let's figure out how we can serve and worship him, even in the toughest times and in the environment and the conditions in which we find ourselves. Like Jacob, it's going to take some time. But we know, because we read the last chapter, that it's well worth it. So God bless, and let's keep the faith.